Chris Carter here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's the North Shore Drive podcast. We're back here on a Monday with Ray Fittipaldo. The Steelers declined Najee Harris' fifth-year option. What does that mean? How is that going to impact the offense? And how does that change maybe Arthur Smith's approach to what he's building in the Steelers offense? All that and the crazy rumor started from Jaylen Warren about where Justin Fields might play in the Steelers team. All that here and more on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Get all of our written work at post-gazette.com. You can find us here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube every day, Monday through Friday, but especially on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the North Shore Drive podcast. And as always, is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, there were 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. More on Mike's Beer Bar and the amazing people there later. Ray, we're back from the weekend, and Brian and I had to record our show a bit early because I had to take care of some things on the Friday. So we weren't able to respond properly to Najee Harris's fifth-year extension not being taken by the Steelers here. But now that we've had some time to process it, happened over the weekend. Paul Zeiss gave his opinion. I want to get your thoughts on just what does this mean for what the Steelers plan? Because that one, I honestly was looking at a $6.79 million fifth-year extension. Seemed like a gimme deal for Najee Harris, who's been a focal part of the offense the last 3 years, even while the offensive line had been bad, the quarterback situation had been bad, and the coordinator situation had been bad.
Right. Yeah, I mean, listen, I know the Steelers kind of put out there that, hey, well, we want to see how he fits in Arthur Smith's offense. We're not closing the door on Najee being part of this team in the long term, Chris. But I don't know about you, but, when you decline the fifth-year option, I think it's 90 to 95% sure that this is going to be Najee Harris's last year with the Steelers. And inevitably, I can't help but think that maybe we're on to the Jaylen Warren era where he's going to get the predominant carries in this offense and the most touches. So I think it's fair to wonder that, if you look at, the playtime percentage from last season, Harris 53%, Jaylen Warren had 49%. The touches were pretty close. Harris had him in touches, but not by a whole heck of a lot. So, if we're going to get on with Jaylen Warren being the feature back within this offense, I think we're maybe looking at that happening sooner rather than later this year. I don't know what other read you can make other than that when you look at that decision.
Right, because I'm sitting here saying, like, I hear the whole thing about they're trying to see if, how Najee fits into the Arthur Smith offense, and I want to get more into that later. But I think that there's, you sit here and you're thinking, like, it's not like he was going to be owed $10 to $12 million. Like, then it would be a different story, especially in today's NFL where the running back position is continuously devalued and all this other stuff. I would get that. But, like, literally, the Steelers would, even if they had just given him the fifth-year extension and it's done, the Steelers would have like $87.2 million in cap space the year that would hit. And I know that they'd have some questions to answer because that year Russell Wilson wouldn't be under contract unless something happens. Justin Fields wouldn't be under contract unless something happens. Pat Freiermuth, and there's a few other guys too. So, like, there'd be some numbers to have to throw around. But it seemed like one guy that you could easily just keep around for what it would make him the 12th highest paid running back in the league. Like, that's not a crazy price you're asking for. And it's a 1-year tie-in for a guy that, if you're not sure if you want to tie yourself to him too long-term, a fifth-year extension seems like the perfect idea to kind of handle that. That's kind of where I was just like, what's going on here? It does make me raise my eyebrows at what the Steelers' actual plans are. Do they want to make Jaylen Warren RB1? But, we've also heard that, maybe there's concerns that Jaylen Warren couldn't hold up the way that Najee is held up when he's taking the bulk of the carries week in and week out. And that's what makes them a great 1-2 punch is Najee kind of sets the tone, and then Jaylen comes in and uses his explosiveness to play off of that.
Yeah, listen, I think this has a lot of similarities to what happened in Dallas. I think Ezekiel Elliott was a better running back than Najee was earlier in his career. But you had that nice tandem with Pollard down there for a while where eventually it worked out. You realized Dallas wasn't going to pay premium dollar to keep Ezekiel Elliott. Eventually they were just going to go with Pollard as their running back. And I just get a similar feel here for how it's unfolding, with the Steelers. If you look at it, Chris, you mentioned the durability. He started 51 consecutive games for the Steelers. He's always available. He almost never fumbles, right?
Yeah.
He's not a detriment to your offense in that way. I mean, we could sit here and nitpick. He's not a game breaker. He's not going to break a lot of big plays for you. He's not that type of a running back. I think he's an adequate receiver out of the backfield. They don't really need to use him that way because they got Jaylen Warren. But there have been plenty of times, I watch him catch a dump off and he stiff arms guys and, he'll make something out of nothing. So from that perspective, Chris, I'm with you. I don't get it from that perspective. I'm not sure what else he could have done. If you want to maybe look at some of the off the field stuff, his comments after the Browns loss in Cleveland that got Matt Canada fired.
Could be there.
Maybe that was an aspect of this decision. I never read too much into him not getting a captaincy again in 2023 like he had in 2022, but maybe there was something that we don't know about that. So, a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but in the end, I think this is the era of the running back that we're in now. You're not going to pay those guys, even when it's a modest fifth-year option for less than $7 million. Teams like the Steelers, as the Steelers proved, just aren't going to pick up that number.
Yes, certainly. And to your point about fumbles, Najee Harris has 978 touches in the regular season during his career and only 5 fumbles. That means he fumbles once every 195 touches. So that is an insane rate. Jaylen Warren, for an example, there he's also fumbled 5 times, but he has 315 touches. That's every 63 touches. So you're talking about Najee Harris is doing better than is protecting the ball 3 times as well as Jaylen Warren. And as we know about the Steelers, their big thing is protect the football. Yes, make the big plays, but don't turn it over. And Najee Harris, and another thing about Najee Harris too is the numbers that he has. I know a lot of people say, well, he averages 3.9 yards per carry. He averaged 4.1 last year, but 3.9 over his first 3 years combined. And he's not a game breaker. He doesn't do this. These were all years where the offensive system was being, people were making fun of it. People were chanting on the Pat McAfee show in Utah to fire Matt Canada. Like it just baffles me how there's such like a notion that Najee Harris is just such a bad player because he didn't have like 1,500 yards in any of his first few seasons. But again, and I think a lot of people have been able to point this out, he's the first Steeler to ever get 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and he's the only running back in the NFL to get 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons in the last three years, in each of the last 3 years. And I shout out to Dale Lally for pointing this out. He posted it on Twitter, but this he of his draft class, he has the most yards from scrimmage, and he's only second in touchdowns by 1 behind Jamar Chase. So I get that he hasn't been Adrian Peterson or LaDainian Tomlinson, but he's been pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. The touchdown thing. I think he had 28 touchdowns in his first 3 seasons. I think he had 8, 9, something like that. Yeah. So he's a guy who's been productive for you early in his career before Jaylen Warren established himself. He was getting some receiving touchdowns. So, it's something that I think people are going to question about this decision into the summertime. We're not going to get a chance, I don't think, to talk to Omar about this. We might get a chance to talk to Mike, during OTAs and in minicamp about this decision. But, the other thing about this is Najee Harris avoided us all last spring. He didn't do interviews, I don't think, until the end of minicamp or maybe even training camp, because he's not obligated under NFL rules to talk during the spring. So if you thought that was going to be an issue last year, imagine this year. Unless he really wants to get something off his chest, Chris, he's not going to talk this spring either. So we might be in the dark a little bit about this for a while, but just on the surface, to me, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless Arthur Smith communicated with people in that building that Jaylen Warren is the better fit, and maybe they just want to get on with the future here in 2024.
I want to talk more about that because Arthur Smith is kind of the name that I thought would be really interesting for these running backs to get more touches and more opportunities. We'll talk about that here more on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you that this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to the North Shore, there's no better place to go because they got amazing food, amazing drink, and they got an amazing location with all the televisions to watch all your different sports while you're there. Say you're coming into the North Shore and you're getting ready for a Pirates game, but you need a place to eat dinner before you go in the stadium. Mike's Beer Bar has got you covered. They have amazing meals like steak on a stone. They also have seafood on a stone. They have amazing flatbreads where you can get your choice cut of meat brought to you on a heated stone. Every time you cut off a piece, you just press it into the stone. You choose how well done you want every single bite. And then also over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local Pittsburgh beers are available on tap, and they're always switching new ones in and out. So you're always getting new experiences of all the great breweries that are in the Pittsburgh area. It's Mike's Beer Bar. It's the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go there today, and when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's expand this discussion a little bit more to Arthur Smith, because to me, when the Steelers hired Arthur Smith, the first thing I went and looked at was like, okay, I know everyone's going to look at Atlanta, but let's look at his last time as an offensive coordinator. And that was a guy who turned Derrick Henry Derrick Henry was like a promising, talented, big back with some potential, into King Henry, who dominated the NFL. In his 2 years with Arthur Smith, an offensive coordinator, those are still the only 2 years he averaged over 5 yards per carry, and it's still his two best statistic years in his career that kind of set the stage for him to be this dominant running back and having the persona that he has. And so my thinking was, this would be a great fit for Najee Harris. And he's not Derrick Henry. He doesn't have like Derrick Henry's speed or anything like that, but he could be in an offense that allows him to be a bruiser, be a bit of a playmaker. Arthur Smith can dial up a run game that features that and more. And now if Najee Harris is being forced to prove himself in it, it makes me wonder, what is the priority of this Arthur Smith offense? Because to me, I thought the 1-2 punch of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren was something the Steelers want to sign up for at least 2 to 3 more years.
Yeah, like when you look at it, Chris, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Can you tell me who the backup running back was in Tennessee for those 2 years that Smith had Derrick Henry?
I want to say it was Deion Lewis was there for a bit, but I think he left the year that Derrick Henry took over and became the man.
So that's my point. Like he was the workhorse. Like he was doing Mike Tomlin. He was old Mike Tomlin with run the wheels off Willie Parker, right? I mean, you think of the running is one thing, but Derrick Henry in the passing game too, he was a force in the passing game. So he was getting almost all of the touches in Tennessee, and that wasn't going to be the way it unfolded here in Pittsburgh with Jaylen Warren being such a strong second option within your offense. So I still think Arthur Smith is going to be run heavy. That's what Art Rooney wants. I think deep down, that's what Mike Tomlin wants. Of course, this new offensive line has to take shape. These rookies have to come in and get off to a good start. I think if that running game is really going to, be a factor for this team. So in the end, there are some similarities where I can look back and think, okay, perfect fit. Najee Harris, Arthur Smith, this could work. But then when you look at the Jaylen Warren dynamic out of all this, maybe they have something different in mind here as they prepare for the season.
To your point, I just pulled up the numbers. In 2019, it was Deion Lewis, so I was correct about that. In 2019, but Derrick Henry had 303 carries that season. That's the first year with Arthur Smith.
Yeah.
Deion Lewis was the next with 54.
Right.
So you're talking almost 6 times as many carries. Like, that's a ridiculous ratio. Whereas like Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, Najee had 255 carries last year. Jaylen Warren at 149. So like a very decent split there. And then in 2020, it was just as bad, if not worse. Actually, it was worse. Derrick Henry had 378 carries. To the next guy was Jeremy McNichols with 47. And in each of those years, the third leading rusher was Ryan Tannehill. So him scrambling was next. But that was the point of those offenses, was get King Henry the ball. And I do feel like the Steelers, they would not be wise to put their whole offense into Najee Harris the way the Titans did in those years, because I don't think Najee Harris is that type of back. But I do think leaning more on him and then splitting time with him and Jaylen Warren, that would have been your key to have this dynamic run game that can hit you from all these different angles. Because from one side, you could have Najee Harris being the bruising back, and with this new offensive line, they're bullying people. He could bully people with them, and that can be the destroying of a defensive front. And then after you tire them down, Jaylen Warren comes in, and he's this complete change of gear where his speed and explosiveness, if you're a little bit slow because you're getting beat up by this physical run game, he's going to take off and get you your big 50-yard touchdown run. It just that seemed to be the plan there. But here's the other thought here, Ray, is maybe they think that they can replace Najee Harris with a similar type of player after a year's time, and they don't need to pay him $6.7 million, which, again, to me, that was nothing, as far as getting an experienced running back who you trust and knows your system.
And plus, it would justify drafting him in the first round. And I think this is kind of a loss for the previous regime under Kevin Colbert. You use a first-round pick on a guy, and he's out the door just like Terrell Edmonds and Artie Burns, and we can keep Devin Bush. We can keep going down the list. So that's neither here nor there, but that's also a reality of the situation. It's another. I don't view this as Najee as a failed first-round pick if he's only here for 4 years, but I think when you draft running backs in the first round, there's almost the expectation where if you produce the way Najee's produced, you just pick it up and you roll with it because he's such a good player. Now, listen, there is some risk with the fifth-year option, just getting into the business aspect of this for fans. Once that is signed, it's a guaranteed contract. So
right.
Once the Steelers say the Steelers would have picked that up on May 2nd or whatever, his contract would be fully guaranteed for the 2025 season. So if he blew out his ACL in the January playoff game, he wouldn't be available for you for half the season. Oh, well, that's the business aspect of this decision. So, maybe that's part of it too. He does play a brutal game. Maybe they view it. He's been fortunate with injuries. Maybe there's some underlying issues with injuries that we don't know about. Maybe they just kind of get him to Sundays and he deals with whatever. So whatever the reason, I think like we talked about at the top, I think you're right. I think it's going to be Jaylen Warren in 2025, and then somebody like Najee Harris to kind of pick up that load and, pick up where he left off. Probably a draft pick. It's not ideal to use a draft pick on a running back, but if you're the Steelers, you don't really have that guy on your roster now. So whether he's a draft pick next year, or maybe you find a diamond in the rough like you did with Jaylen Warren in undrafted free agency, but it almost looks like that guy's going to come either in the draft next year or as an undrafted free agent to pick up the slack behind Warren.
It's a very good point there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they reinvest here, because my other thought is, if you don't sign Najee Harris, then running back becomes a draft need next year wherever you get it, and you already are probably looking at defensive line, cornerback, wide receiver. Like there's already draft needs lined up for next season, and we're not even into rookie camp yet. So I think there's certainly a lot of questions there. I want to talk about another aspect of Jaylen Warren though, because Jaylen Warren, while everyone's probably looking at him and saying, "Ooh, he could be the next Willie Parker. He could be the next big thing at running back for the Steelers." He made waves for a different reason this past weekend. I want to go over that with Ray Fittipaldo here in a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Let's dig into what became a very short national hysteria. Now, for those who don't know, I was off this weekend. I was off the clock. I was trying to enjoy some me time with some friends and family and enjoy that. And I see this news pop up, and I'm like, I'm not even paying attention to this. But basically, what happened was on Cam Hayward's Not Just Football podcast, Jaylen Warren was on, and they were talking. They were kind of joking around about the new kickoff rules. And so someone from the crowd asked Jaylen Warren, "Oh, is there a plan for you to maybe be a returner?" And he was like, "No, and then he starts joking around, and he says, and he does say this quote: "Our special teams coordinator, Danny Smith, was talking about Justin Fields being back there." And we were like, "Hold up!" And then we looked at him. Justin Fields is about to be back there, and then it kind of got like everyone kind of like laughed, and then just moved on. But then all of a sudden, for some reason, this gets picked up. And then Justin Fields could be a kick returner. The Steelers don't plan on using Justin Fields at the quarterback position. They want him as a special teams guy. And it just became this firestorm. And Ray, I wasn't even working. I was just like, I know that ain't real. When you see this and you're on the clock, you're doing your thing. You're like, you have to be like, can you guys give me 5 minutes, please?
Yeah. Listen, the very reason that Cordero Patterson is in a Steelers uniform is because of this new kickoff rule. So he is going to be the guy back there no matter what. I know it's new rules, and there's probably a lot of spitballing going on inside every NFL building about, oh, maybe this guy will do it or maybe this guy. But think about it from this perspective too, Chris. If you're Justin Fields and you're on a 1-year contract with the Steelers, why in the world would you put your body in harm's way when you're trying to get paid next offseason, right? So, I'm not saying he's not a team guy or anything like that, but it's just a little bit fantastical to believe that they would use a backup quarterback as a kick returner in any aspect of the special teams. Maybe in an emergency, if Patterson's injured and you don't have another guy up on a 46-man game day roster, but there's no way they're using Justin Fields as their kick returner on a full-time basis in the 2024 season.
Especially because they signed Russell Wilson, but we know Russell Wilson don't got too much more time in the NFL. When they traded for Justin Fields, the idea was that they could prepare Justin Fields to maybe take over for Russell Wilson, either if things go south this season or if things go great and you just can't afford Russell Wilson next season, then Justin Fields may turn into your franchise quarterback. But what sense does it make to spoil that with special teams? Now, if you were to tell me maybe they threw in some extra packages with him and Arthur Smith's offense where he lined up in the backfield, along with Russell Wilson, and they might have like a trick play where one gets the snap and the other runs off, and okay, I could buy that temporarily. But not on kickoffs. And I know that kickoffs are the new rule where you can't move until the ball's actually caught and it's all this other stuff. But my gosh, I saw that and I was just like, what, man, it must be a slow news week after the draft for that to get that as much. And it's one thing for it to just pop up. Ray, every day you and I see things pop up on Twitter or something. There's always some sort of drama. But this caught national attention. And I was just like, how did we get here?
Yeah, listen, no one knows how this new kickoff rule is going to affect the actual play, but I suppose Justin Fields can pull the old Frank Wycheck, right, and throw it across the field, and when Cordero Patterson runs, right, do the old throwback behind the line of scrimmage type of thing, and do the old lateral, and maybe that'll make it worth his while. But yeah, I'm with you. I think the Steelers it wouldn't be smart business on their part if they didn't have offensive packages for Fields, right? Because you acquired him. You don't know really what the future is beyond the season with Russell Wilson. You have to find a way to get him involved in the offense somehow. So whether it's certain packages where he comes in as a runner and you utilize his skills and his speed in that vein, or, maybe you just get him in there for a series or two. He can run your offense, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, he can just be your quarterback. So, I think there's a lot there that's going to unfold with Justin Fields and how he's used this year. But I think we can both agree that special teams will be about less than 1% of that, and 99% will be his role on offense.
Agreed. I can't see a way forward with that making sense. And I get it. Yeah, I like the idea of him being in sort of a gadget role for the offense, just to get a chance to see how he does. And also, like, maybe you get him some plays where he actually plays some quarterback that here and there, catching people off guard with something. But yeah, not special teams. I think that's when we're doing the most. And I even think Jaylen Warren, like, I felt like Jaylen Warren shouldn't be held at fault here. I think he thought that this was coming off like a joke, and I think it just whoever popularized that, they did not pick up on that. And so at least to me, I mean, you know what? I will pay $100 to somebody's charity of choice if we go into training camp and Justin Fields is the leading kick returner. Then I'll be like, all right, you got to shut up. You was wrong about that one. But that ain't happening. So they can get out of here with that one. Ray, it's funny to me, man, when we see all the different stuff and all the different rumors and people that say they have an inside source and they have this, that's the third. And it's when we see this kind of stuff come across us, and we're just like, man, like, these are the days that make us wish, like, we can't wait for training camp in August so all this can please stop.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's the NFL offseason. The national people pick up on this. I think Pro Football Talk did a little blurb on it or whatever, but it's that time of year, Chris. People need their football fix, and whatever it is, they're going to give it to them, whether it has any fact behind it or not.
Well, we will give you your football fix here every week, all season long, even during the off season here in the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And we promise not to inundate you with crazy stories like this one. But to get all that, read all our work at post-gazette.com. Find us here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Also find us here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Search Post-Gazette Sports to get our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as all the daily content that comes from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. From Ray Fittipaldo, I'm Chris Carter. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast. Back Wednesday with more here on all things Pittsburgh sports. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.